It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Mike Snyder, managing partner of RSM Marketing. RSM provides an outsourced marketing department to companies across all industries nationwide and focuses on the middle market. Mike helps business owners escape fruitless efforts and endless tactics, marketing spends that produces little to no ROI. Prior to RSM, Mike was CEO of a Kansas-based ad agency serving larger clients such as Cargill and Cox Communications. He also founded and sold a technology company. Mike is a retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel who served as a public affairs officer in New York City, the Pentagon, and NORAD, where he led media relations in the aftermath of 9/11. He is a graduate of Marine Corps Command and Staff College and has also worked in the accounting and nonprofit industries. Mike has a master's degree in marketing communication from the University of Kansas and taught strategic marketing for years in an MBA program there, where his unorthodox approach to marketing instructions earned him the highest student scores within the program. Mike Snyder, welcome into the corner office.
Hello, Brant.
Great to have you back. And as we talked a couple of minutes ago, you're in beautiful Wichita, Kansas today, from what I understand.
Yeah, it's a nice chilly fall day.
Weather's starting to get nice. Yeah. I'm down in South Florida. It was 91, 93 up until 2 days ago. And then yesterday morning, I woke up and it was 56 degrees. And I said, I'm going for a bike ride. So we're beginning to have the cooler weather here, too. So that's awesome. God's grace.
You guys deserve a break.
Absolutely. It's been a hot, hot summer. Well, Mike, we always like to get started talking a little bit about our CEO guests in their early years. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
Yeah, my dad was in the Marine Corps. As a matter of fact, if anybody's ever seen the movie The Great Santini with Robert Duvall, that was my dad. No kidding. He flew F-4s in the Marine Corps during the Vietnam War, and then was one of the first 13 pilots to incubate the Harrier program after the Vietnam War. So I grew up, with the Great Santini. I'd mow the yard. He'd come out and inspect it. I didn't get liberty, which is basically, running around with your friends until the inspection passed. And a lot of times it didn't pass. So, born in Indiana, raised all over the country, spent a lot of time in Yuma, Arizona, which is a border town 1 mile from Mexico, 1 mile from California. And as they like to say, 1 mile from hell.
Brothers and sisters?
Yeah, one sister.
Yeah, cool. And mom just kind of kept the family together as you walked around, or did she moved around, or did she have different work?
No, pretty much a homemaker. She was, elementary school teacher for a bit, and then just kind of odd jobs throughout the years. Now, mom and dad actually both ended up being pastors, right, of a church. So dad, that was what he did after he retired from the Marine Corps. He retired at age 38. Can you believe that?
That's nice. He joined probably at 18 or something, right?
He sure did. Yeah, you can't do that anymore. But, he was an officer. He was a Mustang, they call it, when you're an enlisted guy who becomes an officer.
So did he become a pastor right away after he graduated from the Marine Corps, so to speak?
Well, he kind of did. He became kind of like the executive pastor of a church down there, Mount Zion there in Yuma. And then he went to Kenneth Hagin's Bible College and kind of got his degree and, training, and then he went to Phoenix and started a church. He is also an entrepreneur.
And you grew up in a church home?
No, he was a atheist.
Oh, okay. But you did though. You by the time that you came around, mom
Well,
and
I was
dad.
raised Catholic.
Okay. All right.
And then we transitioned about when I was in fourth grade and pretty much went to charismatic, honestly, and now an evangelical. So what a path.
Yeah, cool. What were some of the major things you remember from mom and dad, other than the inspection after every chore being done around the house?
Well, I mean, it was such a different time, right? I mean, they were boomers, and I mean, both very loving. Dad was a little distant, because he was, he was overseas for 3 years of my youth. Before I was 10, he'd spent 3 years in Japan. Because that's what Marines do. You go on float, or you have a year unaccompanied away, in some foreign country. So, yeah, he was a little distant, but that made, the rest of us very close, mom and me and my sister.
Any other influencers, you know, teachers or coaches or folks that had an impact on your life in those early years?
Well, it was interesting because I've always kind of been like a nice guy, and not what I would call driven or type A. It's when I got into high school, um, it became competitive, and to answer your question, that was very striking to me. I'm like, wait a minute, you know, I do have this competitive streak. I want to compete for like, the best GPA. I want to be in these honors programs, AP classes. And so I found myself very competitive, and that lasted. As a matter of fact, when I later went into the Marine Corps, all lieutenants have to go through this thing called the basic school. And out of 232 lieutenants in my class, I graduated 15th. And it wasn't necessarily, and I think this is very important for the rest of the story, it wasn't what I would call a goal. It was just a standard of excellence that exists to this day because of what I experienced in high school. You either decide you're gonna compete, so to speak, and have that standard of excellence that results in achievement, or you're not going to. And I chose to, if that makes any sense.
So you're a pretty good student in school, it sounds like.
Yeah, I was a very good, and I'm a natural, what I would call, standard education learner. I didn't have any hangups that way.
What about other activities? Did you get involved in sports, music, theater, debate?
No, really, my the other thing that really influenced me from a very young age was the Jesus movement. I mean, I was a youth and teen during the 1970s. So, matter of fact, that the movie Jesus Revolution just came out, and I mean that was pretty much the story of my upbringing. So, I spent sometimes every day of the week at church. I mean, there were 2 services on Sunday, then there might have been a revival, so you're there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, then you have youth group on Friday. Saturday, you're out there going door to door. No kidding. So I mean, that was very intense, and that was really my extracurricular activities for the most part during high school.
Was there a youth pastor or someone that you met during that period that had an impression on you or inspired you in any way?
It's so interesting. No, I would not say so. I mean, honestly, the teacher that I really most influenced me was my freshman. Was a freshman. No, I was a senior in high school. He was a former Army Special Forces guy, former Hell's Angel. Joe Gilmer. I remember his name. It's so weird. Yeah, yeah, totally. And he just was badass. Without trying. And I don't know. He just kind of spoke to your life in even ways that you can't even articulate. But it was just left a striking impression as far as he'd come up and say, you can do better than that. Come on, what are you doing? Don't sandbag. Okay.
Pushed you competitively.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You mentioned Dad was an entrepreneur. What about you? Did you have any entrepreneurial things you did when you were younger?
Yeah, I guess you could say honestly, my first job was as a newspaper boy. Was 13 years old, and I got assigned this paper route on base. So I was, at the on base, in Yuma, and I think I had 50, subscribers on my route. And then they ran a contest. No kidding, right? So the Yuma Daily Sun ran a sales contest for all the paper boys, and during that span of 90 days that they ran the contest, I tripled my newspaper route. Nice. And I did it by, market expansion. That was my strategy, right? So I was delivering papers with amongst the family housing. I decided to go to the barracks with the single Marines and sign them up too. And that had never been done before. So yeah, I won the sales contest. I got to go to Disneyland in California as a result.
Cool. All expenses paid.
That's it.
I love it. That's great. What about some other jobs? Anything during high school or your early college years that you did that were memorable and made an imprint on you?
The second job I ever had was I was a busboy at this buffet, and all the tour buses going from Phoenix to San Diego would swing by Yuma and just gorge for lunch or dinner. And so, that's when you learned how to really work your butt off. So on one hand, my very first job was as a sales guy, and I was working hard. The second job was just really working hard, just hard work. And then another job that really made an impression was I was a senior in high school. Between that and going to college, I was a Fuller brush man. For those of you who remember what a Fuller brush man was, and that was back then, that was 1989, and that's when they had all these big boxes dedicated to ceiling fans, because ceiling fans were relatively a new creation. And so Fuller brush came. I was going door to door in Broken Arrow. These suburban lots are like 5 acres, and I'm going door to door walking 5-acre lots. So not very smart. So Fuller brush came out with the world's first ceiling fan duster brush, and I grabbed that thing, and I decided I was going to go from B to C to B to B. So I started going to these ceiling fan stores. I would just walk in with a brush, and literally somebody down and I would go, "I just bought a ceiling fan, and I need that brush." I sold 1,000 brushes in a week.
Nice. So what was the correlation there? How did you see the connection between the two?
I don't know, Bran. I mean, that's kind of the mysterious thing. Even in sales and marketing and running a business, it just seemed natural, So I just knew that nobody had it, and everybody who probably wanted it started at a ceiling fan store. As a matter of fact, Fuller Brush hauled me into their headquarters in Great Bend, Kansas, to their executive team on a weekend, wanting to know how I was selling all these brushes. I'm 18.
I love it. I love it. And you told them the story.
I said, I just walk in with the brush, which is a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I didn't bother with, the catalog and all this other stuff.
That's great.
Yeah.
Was it clear that you'd go to college?
Oh, yeah. It was a foregone conclusion. And I had a 4-year ROTC scholarship to help pay for it, or basically paid for the whole thing. And that was Navy when I was a Marine option, which is how I got into the Marine Corps upon graduation.
And where did you do your ROTC?
University of Oklahoma. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And were you based there then? Was Dad based there at that time? Or what made you?
Well, yeah, that's when Dad was. Well, actually, no. So yeah, I graduated high school from Broken Arrow because Dad was going to Kenneth Hagin Bible College, and I had a girlfriend who became a wife, and she was going to Oklahoma State, and so I went to University of Oklahoma, where she ultimately transferred. And the day that I graduated college, I became a second lieutenant, and also got married that night.
Awesome. And then how many years did you spend in service?
Well, ultimately, I ended up spending 24 years on active duty and the reserves. I was a public affairs guy, had a journalism undergrad, so went into public affairs and have had just the most unorthodox, experiences in the Marine Corps. I mean, my very first duty station was New York City.
Wow.
And so, so thankful to God and the U.S. Marine Corps for just the incredible experiences. I mean, nobody could have told me to go to New York City. I'd say, no, I'm not doing that. But when the Marine Corps says...
Did they have a base there or training? Or why
they had a little public affairs office with 4 Marines interacting with basically the rest of the world through New York.
Wow.
And, and representing the Marine Corps' interests with various stakeholders,
Awesome.
And
what were
made me who I am today.
Yeah, what were some of those responsibilities then?
Oh, my gosh. Well, we did media relations. And so, Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, occurred while, I was in New York City. And so we interacted with the international, media, answering all kinds of questions about the Marine Corps and gas masks and blah, blah, blah. That was one. We also interacted with the PR and entertainment industries, as consultants on shoots, regarding the Marine Corps, whether it's a uniform, or it's even a color of a paint that they wanted to name after some sort of Marine Corps label. And so we did that. and then really government relations and what I would call institutional relations. Like, we were down in Wall Street a lot, New York Stock Exchange, just, making sure that basically our mission was making sure that America and all of the subsets understand the relevancy of the Marine Corps today, regardless of how it fit in with them. Also
great opportunity. What a
great
opportunity. Did they give you some leadership responsibilities early on?
Well, yeah, my boss got deployed, right? So I was working for a major, and here I was a second lieutenant. He got deployed to the Sand, Kuwait, right? Immediately. This was 1990-91. Yeah. And so I ended up running the office as basically a new college grad, new officer, major market, taking orders from the Pentagon and executing it there in New York City. So yeah, it was a lot of responsibility very quickly.
So you started managing people pretty early on. Were they like you, fairly young graduates, or were they people that had been doing that job for a long time?
No, as a matter of fact, they were two salty sergeants, right? Because only four of us. So here's this 22-year-old, and that is the glory of the military. Is these young officers, right? That get kicked out of college and officer training. Next thing you know, they're managing salty sergeants who've been in the service for 15 years.
Right.
That's something else. It's on one hand, it's humbling, so that's why the Marine Corps believes in this model of servant leadership. On the other hand, it's challenging because you gotta learn and keep up with these guys and gals.
Right. What was the toughest part about that job, that first one you had with those folks?
Honestly, the toughest part of it was the creative aspect of strategy, the creative aspect of marketing, the creative aspect of sales, because there was no handbook for how to engage in these communities in New York. You had to get very, very creative, And I put together strategic partnerships with the Marines and the Radio City Rockettes, and with Marines and Dictaphone, with Marines and MCI Telecom, to do good things, mostly in like the charitable space. But, it was just had to be created out of thin air. And that's really what, if you will, helped create my ability later to get into advertising.
Right. Did you stay then for the 20 plus years you're in the Marine Corps in the PA area?
Well, yeah, so I got out of the Marines after 4 years, but then I kept getting calls from the Pentagon. My wife would say, I'd come home at the end of the day and she'd go, yeah, got a call from the Pentagon. They want you to go to Europe. Yeah, you got another call from the Pentagon. They want you to go to the NAACP National Convention in Minneapolis. And before you knew it, I decided to make the Marine Corps Reserve a hobby. It was my hobby.
Got it.
And so, yeah, I did 24 years in the reserve. I got mobilized 2 times, subsequent to getting out. I went to NORAD over 9/11, was a media relations officer there, just mind-blowing experience. And that really caused me to want to become a business owner after, that exposure at NORAD over 9/11.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. How did you kind of get engaged with that? And what were some of the, contributions you made during that period?
Well, so, on 9/11, having lived in New York, I was at NORAD. I just happened to be doing my 2 weeks of active duty a year. And if anybody remembers, America and the entire world blame NORAD, whose mission is aerospace defense over North America, for not shooting down the airliners. And so the entire world, started calling on 9/11, started calling NORAD and got me or one of the other 2 media officers, and we began 24/7 operations. So the 2 contributions really, is, I would say, comes uniquely, and, your listeners might enjoy this little story, but immediately what happened was, in a crisis, this was a multi-service, there were Canadians, Army, Air Force, Navy, and I was the only Marine. And so in a crisis, these officers defaulted to the cultures of their services. And this actually happened. So the Air Force said, and the Pentagon was offline. We couldn't get a hold of anybody at the Pentagon for guidance. They were our higher headquarters. So the office said, or the Air Force said, hey, we need to have lots of meetings about this before we talk to anybody. The Navy said, we're not going to talk to anybody, meaning the media, until we get approval from higher headquarters. But higher headquarters was offline. The Army said, and they actually said this, we're still pissed off, pardon the French, at the media because of Vietnam, so we don't have to tell them anything. They actually said that. And I was a Marine, and the Marines were like, look, we can't say nothing. We have to say something. And so pretty much, we deferred the media interviews until, some of those requirements were met. And I had the overnight watch, so midnight on 9/11 going into 9/12, I got a frantic call from a Denver news station, and who's the producer said, Major Snyder, you got to help us. Callers are in tears. They think that we're under attack because they hear jets in the sky. And I said, well, I can't tell you where we're flying combat air patrols, but I can tell you, that we're awake, the men and women of NORAD. We're doing our job so that you guys can sleep. And, if you hear the sounds, it's likely the sounds of freedom.
Right.
And that became our policy for the next year.
Give people the calmness and the assurance that they were being protected.
That's correct. If you can't tell them exactly what you're doing, say something, right? Don't say nothing.
So during that time you were in the reserves, then you got into the marketing area. Did you found your first company, or did you work for other people before you
Oh my gosh, right. Yeah, I went into accounting. I went into the accounting category for 3 years, and I got mobilized, went back. And that's when I went into the advertising space and working with my now current business partner at an ESOP, the first ESOP in Kansas, employee-owned company, right? Became an ESOP in 1972. And so I ultimately became, a CEO in the advertising space running an ESOP, which is just horrible. I did not like running that ESOP. Oh my
Too
gosh.
many people voting, or what was the
No, exactly. I mean, I felt like I was running for office every single day.
Yeah.
You just don't have the authority that a founder has.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a very old agency. So Bruce and I, we tripled agency revenues in 3 years, and ultimately founded our own company, and grew that to be a $10 million firm. Well, and it's ongoing today. I got very lucky to, if you want to call it that. Luck is simply what? Preparation meeting opportunity. So I was prepared, and I met Bruce, who's he dyed-in-the-wool real ad guy, and he worked at all these large ad agencies all over the world, and we both just happened to, pretty much be raising our families in Wichita, Kansas. And so, we've been together now 20 years. We've started multiple companies. We've got a parking company, a commercial real estate company, a property management company, got ad agency, marketing firm, or consulting firm. So, yeah, it just continues to expand. The value of a partner is immeasurable if you can find the right one.
How did you meet that partner?
We were introduced by the president of the Wichita Convention and Visitors Bureau. I was talking to John back in the day about how I wanted to consult with middle market companies and Quonset huts all over Kansas, because of course I was just, intrigued with what people create in the middle of nowhere with a team of 10 people, products leading in their category globally. It's true. He goes, my gosh, Mike, you sound just like this other crazy dude named Bruce. You ought to meet him. So we had lunch, and the rest is history.
That's great. That's great. They say that the only ship that doesn't float is a partnership, but it sounds like you've kind of debunked that theory.
Well, bro, I'll tell you, I had been through, I don't know, maybe 7 other partners who didn't make the cut. When I say I, me and Bruce, because we acquired 2 companies over those years and had financial investors, and none of them survived. And we got the financial investors out, got our acquired partners out. And the only reason is because they could not and chose not to keep up.
When did you write your first book, Mike?
That was right around this time a year ago, and it was published 6 months later. So yeah, published in 2023. It's The Great Marketing Lie: 6 Truths for Business Owners and CEO or C-suiters. And it's really what I would call a guidebook on, strategic marketing principles.
What were some of those? Can you share them with us?
Sure. I mean, the very first one is differentiation. Basically the premise of the book is, and the great marketing lie itself is, marketing is hard. And marketing is not hard. Marketing communications is hard. What I do for a living is marketing communications. That's very hard. That's all the marketing jazz that has to be put together correctly. But marketing itself is not. And so there's fundamental principles like, differentiation, and there's models in the book. One of them I love, and I won't really go into, but it's repositioning your competition. And there's an actual model in the book, which anybody can run through themselves or with their management team, which can put them into a blue ocean environment very quickly from red ocean. Most folks start businesses and run businesses in the red ocean because there's not enough differentiation. All right, so that's one principle. Second principle is the cheater tool for marketing strategy. I mean, a lot of companies don't have the pricing power that they want. They don't have the sales that they want because they really don't have a marketing strategy. They're just out there hawking their product, like anybody else in the category. And I'm not talking about small businesses. I'm talking about businesses that are, $250 million in revenue, right? Because that's our space is that we work in is $1 million to about $250 million in revenue. That's where we operate. So you see all these companies and principals scrambling when really they just don't understand the value of marketing strategy and how to get to it. And I'll just tell you this, the cheater tool that works so well is how do you make it easier for your customer? That is the cheater tool to marketing strategy. You answer that question, boil it down to 1 to 3 words, and you can know how to grow your business. You want a little story real quick?
Sure, absolutely.
We were working with a company that sold LED boards, big billboards to, retail size boards. And they wanted to move into, the small business owner space. And so we consulted with them on how to do that. And we, asked them the question, right? How can you make it easier for small business people to work with you? And we found out that, nobody offered online pricing. I mean, you can go price and buy an island on eBay, but you can't get the price for an LED board. And yet we knew these small business owners were likely doing a lot of their research online because, 75% of research in the business space is done online before anybody calls anybody. And so we said, why don't you offer online pricing? That would make it easier. And they didn't like it. They bellyached, but finally they did it. And they ended up selling $1 million that first year, which was a lot. There's a lot of orders. And they found out that, their customers would come back for, repurchase for 4x. And so that segment turned into a multi-million-dollar opportunity, all because of the marketing strategy of online pricing. And so that's how making it easier fit for them.
Makes good sense. Love it. And you've written a second book. I understand it's just being launched this week. Tell us a little bit about that.
I know, right? Well, when I got out of the Marine Corps, the first time I became a licensed minister, it means I could bury you, but I couldn't marry you. And that was in Staten Island, New York, the largest Protestant church or non-Catholic church in Staten Island, about 3,000 people. And so I became a licensed minister. And, ever since then, I've just been a big observer of, how God works in people's lives. And I've had the privilege of hiring hundreds of young people and seeing them listless and they don't know the source of their values. I ask, hey, what do you intend to do with your life? What's the source of your values? They don't know. So after, living my life, I'm now 56 years old. I figured out a few things, especially if you apply certain scriptures, right? And so I wrote a book. It's called The Formula for Knowing God's Will for Christians, Agnostics, and Atheists. And it's on Amazon as of this week, as a matter of fact.
And again, share with us some of the principles from there.
Oh, I'll share, God's will for anybody. And by the way, when I sat down to write this book, I had an outline and God basically told me, no, throw that away. I want you to also make this relevant for agnostics and atheists. My hands started to shake. I don't know how to do that. He goes, well, I do. So just shut up and you start writing and I'll write this for you. And he did. And so really it's like Christians believe in God and agnostics believe maybe in the power of the universe. Right, working on my behalf. And atheists maybe don't believe anything, but I say, look, even your intuition is working for your best. So in this book, it's like, okay, God, the universe, or your own intuition to do two things. And there's two wills of God, and that is one, who you are. And I'm not making this stuff up. This is what's wonderful, right? It's like, look, I'm not a theologian. I don't have to overcomplicate this stuff. I'm not writing it for other PhDs or D-Mens. I'm just I'm a common guy, and so I've lived this and I've seen the results. And so, yeah, absolutely. God first cares about who you are. And that's transformation. Just like the U.S. Marine Corps has a strategy of transformation. So I actually was able to bring the Marine Corps in, right, to talk about who you are today and who you are tomorrow, and it's a lifelong journey. And so that's the first will of God, who you are. After that, he cares about what you do, of course. And that's where really all of the rest of us are like more concerned. What am I going to do with my life? And so we talk about how can you know what it is God wants you to do? Would you like the payoff for that?
Sure, absolutely.
Well, there's the formula, right? So, there's a scripture that says it's he that works inside of you, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. So honestly, the first directive, who you are, is the values, of course, that, are in the Bible, or even just good common sense values in the rest of the world. And then the second is, what you do and how you know what to do is when you have something in your head that you can't shake, and it's also confirmed in your heart and you can't shake it, you do that. That's what you do. And you stop thinking and you accept it. Maybe you prove it out over a matter of weeks or maybe a matter of months. And then there's all kinds of things that happen from there.
Right.
And the book talks a lot about what happens from there because it's not easy.
Awesome. Great. Well, those listeners will know where to find it. Available on Amazon?
Yeah, that's correct.
Terrific. Mike, you've built a lot of companies over your career, and it sounds like you and Bruce are continuing to do so. Tell us a little bit about company culture. What do you do in terms of kind of establishing those principles as you get these companies up and running?
Well, Brand, that's an excellent question, because of course the old adage is, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it does, because you can have the best strategy in the world, and if you don't have a culture solid enough, the execution will falter and you'll fail. And so I have a very specific answer for that. So we had just acquired our first company. It was two companies of the same size, about 20 people each. So small acquisition, but it was a big bite to eat for being equal sized. And we were high growth, and all of a sudden everything came to a grinding halt because everybody wanted to set up all these rules based on the acquisition, right? Two teams, one was very rules based, the other one is very freedom based. And so we got we have a cultural problem here. We got cats and dogs. And so we got a hold of, at that time, so funny what people put online. And so Netflix, I'm sure, had spent, I don't know, maybe $1 million with HR consultants developing their culture model. And then somebody put the whole thing on the internet. And so Bruce found it on a Saturday around midnight and tossed it to me. And I looked at it on Sunday and went, this is it. Right? And it was about a 100-page PowerPoint. And their whole premise there was all around this idea of, stunning colleagues. The culture is around stunning colleagues, which means you don't tolerate mediocrity. You bring on and retain the best talent, and they can't be brilliant jerks. These are their words, not mine. And so we had brilliant jerks in the company. We had people who weren't so good because mediocrity, according to this culture model, of the stunning colleague culture model, mediocrity drives out the talent because the talent doesn't want to be around mediocrity. So you have to drive the mediocrity out of the business. And the other thing you got to drive out of the business is brilliant jerks, because they'll also run out the talent, run away with the talent. The second corollary is you have to give them freedom. You can't have a rules-based culture, right? And it's a brilliant little model. Anybody who wants to contact me, I'll actually send them, the presentation, because for growth companies, it's, it talks about accountability. It's not one of these horrible cultures that says, yes, here are the 15 values that we embrace, which are basically, hey, we're not prisoners. We're not in jail, like honesty and, integrity. Well, that's the bar. That's not a culture, right? And so, we had a very specific culture model, and we measured it year after year after year, employee surveys, and, we've always done stunningly well. I mean, one year we got 100%, at the top line measurement as far as satisfaction with the company and the culture. And that's stunning because, we tend to hire young people who are very critical. Right. They've never worked at a place before. They want to, find the problems and contribute to the solution. So we allow them to do that too. Meant all the difference in the world.
What do you specifically look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire?
Well, learned over the years, we learned two things. So the first one was, and Bruce worked at Koch Industries for a while, and they have market-based management there. And one of the principles is hire for values, teach the skills. So when we started our company, we were high growth. We were $1 million company within a year. And so we were hiring people off the street. And they had horrible values and mediocre skills because they were on the street. But they were available. And we were so miserable after about a year of running our company that we almost shut it down because they were mean people. I ended up calling that whole model meanie heads. People who were mean, people who are fearful, people who are afraid of their failing. And we decided at that point in time, because Bruce said, well, we need to start hiring for values and teach the skills that we may have to teach. And so we started doing that, and that's when we began to turn the company around.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
What about interview techniques? If you had to share what you think is most effective in terms of selecting people that have
thank you. That's right. So exactly. So if we're hiring for values, then of course one of the first questions you ask is, what are your values? And this is actually what helped me led up to writing the Formula for God's Will book, because I realized people really don't. These youngsters anymore, they don't have, because so many of them aren't going to church or being raised in Sunday school and that kind of a thing. So they say, well, my value is to be a good person. Okay, well, define that. Well, I really don't know. I mean, they really don't know what values are. It's like, is patience a value, collaboration a value, loyalty a value. So, but anyway, ask the source of your values, or what are your values? That's one. Two, and this is how I do my interviews, talk to me about collaboration. Talk to me about success or failure that you've had with the team. Because in professional services, which is my category, you got to get it done with the team. This isn't like running a lathe, I suppose, in a manufacturing plant. Of course, all your manufacturing folks out there are going to say, it's more than just running a lathe. I get it. I'm just saying. And then the third thing I always ask is, there's no perfect person. So what is your greatest strength? And I got to tell you, this is hugely important. Tell me your greatest strength, and then let's talk about the 180 of that, because your greatest strength, the opposite of it, is your greatest weakness, and we're here to compensate for that. We're not here to criticize that. We're here to help you ameliorate that greatest weakness. Case in point, creative people, that's their strength. Their weakness, can't manage anything. They're not managers. They need help, right? And so that's an example, of how I run an interview. And anybody, somebody who can get through those questions pretty well, they've generally turned out to be a very good employee.
Awesome. Mike, we're just about out of time. You've been very generous. I appreciate that. But we always have one last question we asked all our CEO guests. And that's kind of what career and life advice would you give to someone who has their eyes on their own corner office someday?
Wow. I'll tell you what, courage. You're going to put yourself out there, and collaboration. One of the best things I ever did was join Vistage, world's largest organization of CEOs, and I had to pay $2,000 a month for a long time. I was in it for 20 years, and that allowed me to expedite my learning as a young, executive, young CEO, and to achieve more than I thought possible. Because of course, Harvard Business Review showed that in a study, 3 people make a genius, right? 3 people. Any 3 people, random people, can pass the Mensa test. And so when you are collaborative as an executive, maybe it's through the Chamber of Commerce, maybe it's through a formatted group like Vistage, you get to genius level faster.
Cool. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I couldn't have done this at all without God. So hats off. Thank you, Lord, for your help.
Amen. Well, Mike Snyder, managing partner of RSM Marketing, thank you so very much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.